In the heart of Enugu, in a quiet and peaceful neighborhood where the sun bathed the red earth in golden light, and the aroma of ofe onugbu and roasted yam often floated through the air, there lived a young man named Chijioke. A hard-working civil engineer in his early 30s, Chijioke was known in the area for his dedication, humility, and most importantly, his unwavering love for his wife, Adiz. They were the couple everyone envied. You could not talk about love in that neighborhood without mentioning the two. They were young, vibrant, and seemed to have the kind of bond that fairy tales were made of. Their wedding had been the talk of the town, a blend of tradition and elegance that drew a crowd even from nearby towns. Adiz, with her smooth chocolate skin, dimpled smile, and sparkling eyes, had danced with grace and joy in her coral beads and George wrapper. And Chijioke, with his clean-shaven face and proud stance in his isigu and red cap, had looked at her like he'd found heaven on earth. After a year of blissful marriage, the Lord blessed them with a beautiful daughter whom they named Chisholm, meaning God is with me. The child brought more laughter, more unity, and more light into their home. Chijioke was a devoted father, and every evening, no matter how tired he was from work, he would lift Chisholm into his arms, spin her around, and sing to her until she giggled uncontrollably. Adiz watched her husband with admiration. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She would kneel during her midnight prayers, thanking God for her peaceful home. Adiz was not just a wife. She was a true homemaker. She cooked, cleaned, cared, and always made sure her husband lacked nothing. She supported his dreams, stood by him when business was slow, and never complained, even on days when the money wasn't flowing. She always said, Udo buisi, peace is the crown, and she guarded it jealously. But as they say in Igbo land, Aishidi MMA Nado Ogologo Oge. Good things never last forever. It began the day a new tenant moved into the compound opposite theirs. She was Ngozi, a stunningly beautiful lady with a curvy figure, soft caramel skin, long artificial lashes, and a laugh that turned heads. She had come to stay with her aunt, who ran a hair salon on the street. It didn't take long before the entire neighborhood began to notice her. The young men lingered longer in front of the compound. Okada riders suddenly became frequent around the area, pretending to wait for customers. But it was Chijioke who fell hardest. He saw Ngozi one morning while driving out to work. She had come out to sweep the front of the house, her wrapper tied loosely, her skin glowing under the soft morning light. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled. That smile changed everything. At first, it was innocent. A wave here. A good morning, sir there. But soon, Chijioke found himself creating excuses to pass by her compound. He started coming home late, claiming workload. He began comparing Adiz's simple house gowns to Ngozi's flashy mini dresses. He began to lose interest in family dinners. And when Adiz asked if everything was okay, he would nod vaguely and say, "Work has been stressful." Adiz noticed the change. It started slowly, missed prayers, late nights, lack of affection. But she didn't complain. She believed it was a phase. She was sure her husband would return to the man she married. But the truth was far from what she imagined. Chijioke had started seeing Ngozi in secret. He would take her out to restaurants in faraway towns, send her money for wigs and clothes, and even rented a small apartment for her under the guise of helping her start life. Adiz was left at home with their daughter, still praying, still hoping, still blind to the storm gathering over her home. Then one day, he told her he had a business trip to Abuja. Adiz, still the ever-trusting wife, packed his bag, kissed him on the cheek, and said a prayer for his journey. But there was no business trip. He was going to marry Ngozi in secret. It was a quiet registry wedding, with only a few of Ngozi's friends and an official witness. No family, no tradition, no kola nut. Just papers signed and lies sealed. 2 weeks later, he returned home with Ngozi by his side, her fingers now carrying a glittering ring. Adiz stood at the door, holding her daughter. "Chi, who is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Chijioke smiled, that same smile he once reserved for her alone. "Adiz, meet Ngozi, my second wife." Silence. That was the first reaction. Adiz stared at the woman standing beside her husband, her ears ringing as if a bomb had gone off. Her hands trembled where they held little Chisholm close to her chest, the child oblivious to the silent chaos unfolding. She blinked. Once. Twice. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe she was hearing things. Maybe this was one of those moments where the mind played tricks to prepare the heart for something painful. But no matter how many times she blinked or bit her lips, reality stood firmly before her. Her husband, Chijioke, had brought home another woman and called her his second wife. Chijioke, she whispered, her voice dry and cracked like harmattan soil. What did you just say? He shifted awkwardly, one hand lightly touching Ngozi's waist as though trying to calm the storm before it began. Adiz, I know it's shocking. I should have told you earlier. But I've married Ngozi. She is now my wife too. I couldn't hide it any longer. The words fell like heavy stones into Adiz's chest. She took a step back, holding her daughter tighter. The child, now sensing her mother's unease, began to fidget. You married another woman, without telling me? She asked, still not raising her voice. It was not the rage that came first. It was the heartbreak, the betrayal, the shattering of trust. Chijioke sighed. Adiz, it was complicated. You wouldn't have understood. I didn't want trouble. But this is my decision, and you have to respect it. Adiz looked at Ngozi, who stood there without shame, clutching her designer handbag and adjusting her red lace blouse. Her false lashes fluttered as she eyed Adiz with quiet pride, her freshly done nails tapping against the handle of her bag. There was no remorse, no apology, just arrogance and triumph. For Adiz, the message was clear. Ngozi knew exactly what she was doing. She stepped aside quietly as Chijioke entered the house with his new wife. That night, Adiz barely slept. She held her daughter all through the night, staring at the ceiling with tears soaking her pillow. Her heart was in pieces. How did they go from a happy family to this? From laughter and unity to betrayal and polygamy? In the weeks that followed, the house became a war zone. Though Chijioke insisted that both women would live in peace, peace had long flown out the window the day Ngozi stepped in with her suitcase. Adiz tried to manage it at first. She cooked, cleaned, and took care of Chisholm as she always did. She tried to avoid confrontation, holding on to the hope that her husband would realize his mistake. She avoided sharing kitchen duties with Ngozi, avoided talking to her, avoided sitting in the same room. Her silence was her shield. But Ngozi was not the type to be ignored. She started with petty provocations, leaving the bathroom wet and messy, wearing Adiz's wrapper without asking, playing loud music at midnight, and always making sure to be overly affectionate with Chijioke in Adiz's presence. She would sit on his lap and call him baby and my sugar daddy, knowing full well it tore Adiz apart. And Chijioke? He said nothing. He acted as though Adiz was invisible. He became a stranger in his own home, spending most of his time with Ngozi, often locking himself in the room they now shared. He stopped joining family prayers. He stopped spending time with Chisholm. Even on weekends, he would drive Ngozi out for lunch dates, while Adiz remained at home like a widow. The neighbors began to talk. Shebi na this man way day follow his wife everywhere before. Women, be careful oh. See how one fine girl don scatter another woman marriage. But that Adiz na good woman, she no deserve am. The whispers grew louder, but Adiz walked with her head high. If she cried, it was in her bedroom, away from the world. Her only focus now was Chisholm, who had started to ask, Mummy, why doesn't Daddy carry me again? One evening, as the harmattan wind blew dust through the windows, an argument broke out. Ngozi had insulted Adiz again. Something about being old cargo and expired woman. Adiz, pushed to the wall, snapped. You came into my home to destroy my peace. You think because you have hips and powdered face that you've won? Look around you, Ngozi. This house was built with my prayers and my sweat. And God is watching. Ngozi laughed. You're just bitter. You're not woman enough. That's why he came for me. Chijioke came out to see what was happening, and instead of diffusing the tension, he shouted at Adiz. Why can't you just behave? Must you always cause trouble? Adiz stared at him, her lips trembling. You took my silence for weakness, Chijioke. But you will remember this day. That night, she didn't sleep in the main bedroom. She laid beside her daughter in the small visitor's room and cried silently. Her once loving husband had now become her tormentor. Things got worse. Ngozi became pregnant. She announced it one bright morning, dancing in the compound as if she had won a lottery. She called her friends and made sure the entire neighborhood heard about it. Adiz felt a stab in her chest. Not because she couldn't have more children, but because the betrayal now came with permanence. A child meant Ngozi was now rooted into Chijioke's life forever. Despite the tension, Adiz didn't leave. She had no job, no money of her own, and no family nearby. Her parents had died years ago, and her only brother was struggling abroad. She stayed for Chisholm's sake. She stayed hoping one day Chijioke would wake up and realize what he was doing to his family. But that day never came. Instead, the house descended into its darkest chapter. The fights became physical. One afternoon, when Ngozi tried to force Adiz out of the kitchen, a struggle broke out. Pushing and shouting, pots fell, oil spilled, and in the chaos, Ngozi screamed and fell to the ground, holding her stomach. She was bleeding. That moment changed everything. The compound was in turmoil. Ngozi's screams pierced the air like the shrill cry of a tortured bird. Blood trickled down her thighs as she clutched her stomach, writhing in pain on the cold tiled floor. Adiz stood frozen, her back pressed against the wall, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She hadn't meant for this. God in heaven knew she hadn't. It was just a push, a reflex, a natural reaction to someone grabbing her hair and dragging her by her wrapper. Jesus, my baby, oh, oh. Ngozi wailed, twisting her body as neighbors began to pour into the compound. Mama Chisholm, what is going on? One of the women shouted. She pushed me. Ngozi screamed, pointing at Adiz. She pushed me. She wants to kill me and my baby. By the time Chijioke arrived, he looked like a madman. Shirtless, panting, and confused. When he saw the blood, he ran to Ngozi's side and lifted her into his arms without even glancing at Adiz. Don't worry, baby. I'm here. You'll be fine. God forbid anything happens to you or our child. The words struck Adiz like thunder. Our child. So he had claimed this new chapter with pride, while she, the one who stood by him through thick and thin, was now the villain in her own home. Ngozi was rushed to the hospital in a neighbor's car. Chijioke went with them, never once turning back. Not once did he ask if Adiz was okay. Not once did he ask what truly happened. She sat on the veranda that night, rocking her daughter slowly in her lap. Her mind was a whirlwind. Her heart was heavy. Neighbors kept their distance, whispering in corners. Ihia, see how peaceful Adiz has suffered. But why she go push a pregnant woman? Even if them day quarrel, Pekin no suppose interim nah. Nobody really knew what had happened. Only the blood remained to tell a one-sided story. 2 days passed. When Chijioke returned home, it was with fire in his eyes. Ngozi had lost the baby. She was still admitted and recovering. Her family had come to the hospital in anger. They ranted, threatened lawsuits, and demanded justice. They accused Adiz of wickedness and attempted murder. Chijioke did not defend his wife. He came home that evening with his voice raised, his words sharp and heavy like blows. You have done enough damage, Adiz, he shouted. I can no longer allow you to remain in this house. You're a danger. You are jealous and bitter. You pushed a pregnant woman, and now I've lost my child. Adiz stared at him from the kitchen doorway, her eyes red but not from sleep. Her face was swollen from days of crying. Her heart was no longer just broken, it was disfigured. Chijioke, she said slowly, her voice calm despite the pain. You know in your heart I did not mean to hurt her. But you have taken my calmness for weakness. You have allowed this strange woman to poison your mind. Do you remember the woman you married? The one who prayed for you when your business failed? The one who fed you when you couldn't even afford tomatoes? Chijioke turned away. He didn't want to remember. He didn't want to feel shame. But Adiz wasn't finished. You abandoned me emotionally. You cheated. You brought in a second wife without telling me. You pushed me to the edge. And now you want to throw me out of the house I helped you build. Chijioke's jaw tightened. You want to leave with your head held high? Fine. But you will leave. You and that child of yours. I don't want more problems in this house. Adiz swallowed hard. So that was it. She turned around and went inside. She packed slowly, folding each wrapper with care, brushing each of Chisholm's tiny clothes with her palm as tears rolled down her cheeks. This was her life she was packing. Not just belongings, but years of love, pain, sacrifice, and memories. All reduced to a gonna-must-go bag. By the time she stepped out of the house with her child on her hip and a small bag in her hand, it was late evening. The orange sun cast long shadows on the ground as if mourning her departure. No one stopped her, not even her husband. The neighbors watched silently as Adiz, barefoot and broken, walked out of the compound with her daughter. Some wept. Others sighed, but no one said a word. Adi stayed with a distant cousin in Nsukka for a while. Life was hard. She had no job, no qualifications beyond her secondary school certificate. But she had something that years of marriage had taught her: resilience. She started hawking small goods, groundnuts, zobo, chin-chin. From street to street, she walked under the hot sun with Chisholm tied to her back. She endured insults, hunger, sickness, but she refused to give up. She joined a church fellowship, and it was through the fellowship that she found help. A kind woman, Mama Ifyananya, who ran a catering business, noticed her and offered to train her for free. Adiz embraced the opportunity with gratitude and humility. Within a year, she became one of the best caterers in town. She saved little by little. She put Chisholm in school. She prayed harder. She worked longer. And slowly, her life began to transform. By the time Chisholm turned 10, she was the pride of her school, intelligent, respectful, and full of promise. And Adiz? She had moved from renting a room to owning a small 2-bedroom bungalow. She had staff. She catered for weddings and events across Enugu and beyond. People called her Madame Adiz Delight Catering Services. She had built something from nothing, all by herself. But back in Enugu, Chijioke's life was a shadow of what it once was. After Ngozi lost the baby, things began to crumble. The sweetness ended. Fights began. Ngozi became irritable and restless. She accused Chijioke of being broke, lazy, and unambitious. She insulted him in front of friends. She refused to cook or clean. She stayed out late with other men. Chijioke tried to assert control, but it was too late. The same pride that had led him to abandon Adiz had now swallowed him. He lost his job after missing too many days at work. His small business collapsed. The friends who once surrounded him disappeared. He turned to alcohol. Most nights he could be found at the local bar, muttering to himself, begging for drinks, telling anyone who would listen, "I used to have a good woman, Adiz. If I had just stayed with her, my life wouldn't be like this." But regrets are like ashes. They come after the fire has destroyed everything. One night, drunk and broken, he sat on the road outside his old compound and wept like a child. And somewhere, far away in a cleaner, brighter part of town, Adiz knelt beside her daughter's bed, holding her hand in prayer. "Chiem, thank you for giving me strength when I had none, for turning my pain into purpose." She smiled down at Chisholm, now fast asleep, and whispered, "We made it." The clouds over Enugu city hung low that day. A light drizzle moistened the red earth roads, softening the dust and bringing a certain calm to the city. Inside her cozy 2-bedroom bungalow, Adiz stood by the kitchen window, staring out at her small backyard garden. She had planted bitter leaf and scent leaf there, not just for cooking, but for the feeling of growth, of watching something once tiny and fragile become something strong and useful. Her life had become just like that garden. It had taken 10 years, but Adiz had rebuilt herself, brick by brick, tear by tear, prayer by prayer. From a battered, broken woman thrown out of her husband's house, she had become a respected entrepreneur and mother of an exceptional daughter. People no longer spoke of her with pity. They spoke of her with awe. She had learned to laugh again, to breathe, to smile without pretending. And today was a special day. Chisholm, now a radiant young woman of 20, was graduating as the best student in her department, economics, from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Invitations had gone out. The church was full. Dignitaries were present. Even a commissioner was in attendance. As Adiz adjusted her head tie in front of the mirror, her heart swelled. Her daughter was not just graduating, she was flying. Her story was now the one she once feared would be impossible. Just as she picked up her purse to leave, she heard a knock at the gate. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the front door and stepped out, umbrella in hand. The rain had started falling more heavily now. Standing at the gate, wet from the rain, was a man she hadn't seen in years. Chijioke. But this was not the Chijioke she remembered. The proud, handsome, commanding man who once made her laugh so hard her ribs hurt. This man was thinner. His clothes hung loosely on his body. His eyes were sunken. His skin, once smooth and golden, was now pale and tired. He looked empty. "Adiz," he said, almost in a whisper, his voice raspy from alcohol and shame. Adiz didn't move. She held the umbrella tightly and stared at him, her heart still, her mind clear. He took a shaky step forward. "I I heard about Chisholm's graduation. I just wanted to see her. And, and to say sorry. For everything. The rain tapped against the metal gate like a clock counting down the moment. Adiz sighed and opened the gate slightly. She looked at him, but not with hatred. Not even anger. What she felt was something far more powerful. Peace. Come in, she said, her voice calm. He looked surprised. I don't hate you, Chijioke, she continued as he stepped under the umbrella beside her. In fact, I thank God for you. If not for everything you did, I wouldn't have discovered the strength inside me. They walked toward the small veranda together. Inside, Chisholm appeared from the hallway. She was dressed in her green and white graduation gown, her cap tilted to the side, her beauty as graceful as her mother's. When she saw her father, she paused. For a second, emotion flickered across her face. Then, quietly, she walked toward him. Good afternoon, sir. Chijioke's hands trembled. Chisom, he croaked. My daughter. Look at you. She smiled softly, respectfully. Thank you for coming. It means a lot. Adiz watched the exchange, her chest tightening slightly, but still she smiled. She had raised her daughter well, not to hate, not to carry bitterness, but to walk with grace. At the graduation ceremony, Chisholm was called to the stage to receive the Best Graduating Student Award. The auditorium thundered with applause. Cameras flashed. People stood. Adiz wept quietly in her seat. And far behind, in a corner, sat Chijioke, his clothes simple, his head bowed, his face streaked with silent tears. That day, he did not speak much. When it was time to leave, he approached Adiz once more outside the church compound. I know I can never undo what I did. But if there's any way I can be part of Chisholm's life again, as a father, I'll do anything. Adiz looked at him gently. That is no longer up to me, she said. It's up to her. He nodded, knowing fully well that forgiveness was a gift, not a right. He walked away slowly, into the drizzling rain, his steps heavy with years of regret. Later that night, after the celebration, after the guests had left, and the house was quiet again, Adiz sat on the veranda with Chisholm. The stars twinkled above them. The breeze was cool. The crickets chirped in the distance. Mummy, Chisholm said, leaning on her mother's shoulder, thank you. For never giving up on me. For being both my mother and my father. You're the strongest woman I know. Adiz kissed her forehead. No, my dear. I was only strong because of you. You gave me something to live for when everything else fell apart. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the night wrapping them in peace. Then Chisholm asked quietly, will you ever remarry? Adiz chuckled. My heart is full already. Love is not always in a man, my daughter. Sometimes it's in purpose, in healing, in peace. And I have all three now. She looked out into the night sky and whispered to herself, Udo Buisi. Peace is the crown. And at that moment, she knew. Her story had not ended in pain, as she once feared. It had bloomed, like the bitter leaf in her garden. From something harsh and unpleasant, into something healing and full of strength. She had won.